Hello, grade 9 learners. Welcome to today's mathematics lesson. My name is Rose Mtimunya, and this lesson is proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. So, I hope you've had a great long weekend and you are well rested, right? And those of you who had homework, I trust you did it. All right. So today we are going to be drawing linear functions, all right? But we are going to use tables of ordered pairs. So we'll just keep referring back to some of the information we learned in our previous lesson, which is using your x-intercept, your y-intercept, and your gradient. But the focus is going to be on drawing the graphs by using points you have determined from your table, okay? So I did mention that you need to bring graph paper, but if you don't have it, please don't get into a panic. You can use one of those books with cross lines in it. You can even use just a simple plain page. What I am actually looking for is not your artistic skills. It's just neat work that is legible and work that has been drawn to scale, all right, properly. So we don't want to see just scratches here and there and dots anywhere. We want everything to be aligned. So you'll need a ruler. Make sure you've got a ruler, and you'll also need a pencil, right? And an eraser in case you make a mistake. The rest we'll figure out as we go, all right? So let's get into today's lesson. Don't forget to save our WhatsApp line 079 454 9535. Okay, 079 454 9535. You make sure you send me your pictures of your work. You also send me any questions that you might have. Don't wait until the end of the lesson. Remember, we have only an hour. So make sure you ask and you maximize on our communication while we are still live. All right. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to use tables of ordered pairs to plot points and draw graphs on the Cartesian plane. So the first focus will be for you to be able to plot points in general. And then the next focus will be for you to be able to draw graphs with the points you have plotted. Your pre-knowledge will be functions. You remember this is when we used to do equivalence. We've done flow diagrams, tables, and then graphs. So we are still building up on all that we've learned. And then you also need to remember information about your Cartesian plane as well as substitution, because you will be given one variable and you'll have to calculate the other variable. And obviously, if you're using substitution, you'll be required to solve some equations. So that knowledge is still important as well. This is your baseline assessment. It says if the rule for finding y in the table below is y is equal to negative 9x plus 6, determine the output values for the given input values, right? So, and then you also have to write down the ordered pairs for these values that are given in the table. Now, I'm going to give you 4 minutes to answer both questions. All right, so take 4 minutes, answer both questions. When you do your calculations, do write down one or two methods of how you would do this and then fill in your table just to make sure you are doing the correct thing. All right, so you have a 4 minutes. All right, welcome back, class. Don't forget to send me those pictures. I'd like to see how you are doing on 079 okay? So this question is based on what we've learned before on functions, right? So what we want to do here is to use substitution. We are going to substitute the x value into the equation of formula y is equal to negative 9x plus 6. And then we will get the value of y. So when we substitute negative 1, we get negative 9 times negative 1 plus 6. And that gives you 15. So you write down your 15 where it needs to be. And then the next one will be 0. Now at x is equal to 0, when do we put x is equal to 0 when we are working with equations? When we are looking for the y-intercept. So at x is equal to 0, we're actually looking for the y-intercept. So you've just calculated the y-intercept. And note and remember this. Remember, your y-intercept is always given in the equation, the coordinate for the y. The y coordinate is given in the equation. It's the value of c in your equation. Do you see? It's 6, it's 6. So we have 3 versions of it. We have it in the given equation. We were able to calculate it, and we also have it in the table, right? Then we substitute 1. You would do this for all your points, and you'll get that when you substitute 1, your answer is negative 3 for y. When you substitute 2, you get negative 12 for y. What do you get when you substitute 3? You should get negative 21. I'll just do the x is equal to 4. So you have y is equal to negative 9 times positive 4, right? Plus a 6. This is what you should have used to calculate that, and you would get negative 30. Then when you substitute 5, you should have a 39, and it will be positive. Okay. All right. So just to quickly fix your work on this part of your table, I am going to give you just 1 minute, but first we need some marks. Now for your marks here, you're going to have 1 mark for each correct value. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So just for the first part, write down your mark out of 7, snip a pic, and send it to us. All right. So I'll give you just 1 minute to quickly correct your work before we move on. Okay, class, just one correction I need to make. When you substitute the value of 5, your answer there should be negative 39. Remember, it's a positive times a negative. 5 times negative 9, right? So please just do put that negative sign there. So if you have a negative 39, you are actually correct, all right? Okay, so now we are going to move on to the ordered pairs. So I will correct that as well in the ordered pairs part. Right, with your ordered pairs, what you want to do is to write down the x value and then the y value. So you always start with x and then y. Remember, your ordered pairs are given in alphabetical order, starting with x and then y, right? So this is what we should have, and we still have a negative 39 at the end there. So what you want to do is to make sure you've chosen the correct pairs, and you always start with the value of x followed by the value of y. So here we have 1 and negative 3, 2 and negative 12, 3 and negative 21, 4 and negative 30, 5 and negative 39. Right. So if we were to draw this graph, what we realize is that as the values of x increase, the values of y decrease. Do you see that? So this graph would actually have a negative gradient. You did see that it's a negative 9x plus a 6 graph, right? So you can quickly just correct your work while I'm on screen. You just have a quick 30 seconds before we move on. So for this, you get 2 marks. It's all or nothing, all right? 2 marks for all the correct ordered pairs. Okay, so all you had to do here was just to take the x value and write down the y value. So, and then group them together inside brackets separated by a semicolon. I think we can move on, right? All right. Now, let's get into today's lesson, starting off with the terms and concepts associated with today's lesson. So the first thing we're looking at is a linear function. Now, a linear function is a graph of a straight line, and the equation of a linear function is given by y is equal to mx plus c. We've done this before. Remember, we covered it last week where we discussed that the value of m is represented by the change in y over the change in x, and then your c is the y coordinate of your y-intercept, right? Now, let's say we are given an equation y is equal to 3x plus 1. Looking at it, we can tell that 3 is the gradient. So that's the change in y over the change in x. And then y is the coordinate, is the y coordinate of the 1 here is the y coordinate of the y-intercept, right? So it represents your c. So the coefficient of x is 3, therefore your m is equal to 3, and m represents your gradient or slope. So that basically represents how steep the graph is. Remember, the bigger the gradient, the steeper the graph, all right? So the smaller the gradient, the less steep the graph will be. All right, and then you know that when you're talking about that, we're actually looking at the incline of the graph, right? Now, your constant term, which is represented by c, is 1, right? And therefore, that is your y coordinate for the y-intercept. What is your x coordinate? It's actually 0. Remember, at the y-intercept, x is equal to 0. Okay? Right. So we are going to be using this concept, but mostly we have to be able to identify the y-intercept and also the x-intercept from our tables when we need to draw our graphs, okay? So we are going to start off by looking at the Cartesian plane. For the first part of our lesson, I am going to move a little bit quicker, all right, so that we can actually get to a part where we draw our graphs, all right? So this is just background information that will make it more enriching for you to understand the concept and where we come from with it, all right? So the Cartesian plane is formed by an intersection of 2 number lines, right? Now, the number lines can be given in 1 quadrant or 2 quadrants. Remember, the vertical number line is known as the x-axis, and then the vertical number line is known as the y-axis, pardon, and then the horizontal number line is known as the x-axis, okay? Now, I think if you've heard the story, the reason why we write Cartesian in capital letters, that's not a mistake. It's because that's somebody's name, right? The Cartesian plane was actually invented by René Descartes. Yes, Descartes. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. He was looking at a fly in the ceiling. Imagine that. He was looking at a fly in the ceiling while he was in bed, and then he wanted to actually explain what is the position of the fly. So he drew 2 perpendicular lines. So basically, he just drew these 2 lines. And remember, the olden day ceilings had little blocks. There were little boxes. So he named those boxes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then he would be able to tell you to go up 3 blocks up, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks up, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks across. And then this is the position where the fly was. So that's how basically the Cartesian plane came about. If it's not apples, it's flies. Maths is a very interesting world, eh? All right, so let's move on to the actual part of mathematics, right? So the Cartesian plane, we've discussed, it has a horizontal number line. This is called the x-axis. Now, this is where your x-axis is located. All right, remember it goes all the way across the y-intercept as well. And then you also have a vertical number line, and this is called the y-axis. Now, where these two lines meet is known as the origin. We are going to discuss the coordinates of the origin in time as well. Right, guys, please don't panic. You don't need to draw these things. You just need a standard one, okay? Just need one quick standard 2 lines, and you can just label. Please don't feel like you have to draw every Cartesian plane that you see all throughout the lesson. If I need you to draw it, I will tell you, and I will give you time to draw the Cartesian plane, all right? So don't get into a panic. Okay. So now, something else we need to remember is that the Cartesian plane is actually divided into 4 regions, and these regions are called quadrants, right? With time, you'll find that you actually end up needing to understand what quadrants are, especially when you start doing your geometry and your trigonometry, all right? So in later grades, but for now, you just need to understand the concept of locating where your points are. So in the first quadrant, the x value will be positive and the y value will be positive. In the second quadrant, as you can tell, the x values are negative here, and then the y values are positive. Then in the third quadrant, both the x and the y are negative. And in the fourth quadrant, you can see there x is positive and here y is a negative. So you have a positive x coordinate and a negative y coordinate, okay? This will help you when you have to locate points and when you're asked to draw your points. That way you'll draw it in the correct quadrant. So do pay attention to understanding how a Cartesian plane should look like and where everything is located. All right. Now let's discuss ordered pairs, right? So a set of ordered pairs is made up of x and y. These are sometimes called coordinates, and the x value will be found along the horizontal number line. Remember, this is where we say it's along the x-axis. Then the y value will be found along the vertical number line, and this is along your y-axis, right? So your ordered pairs are made up of 2 values. We've discussed this. The first number tells you how far you must go left or right of the origin. What we mean by that is that if this is your Cartesian plane, okay, if it's negative x, it means you go from 0 in that direction. This would be negative x. Negative 2, negative 3, it means you must go from 0 and count 2 units to the left. So the negative sign is mostly direction of where you're going, right? Then if it's positive x, you go from 0 to that way. So if it's positive 3, you must count 3 units to the right. If it's positive 4, you count 4 units to the right. And then the second number is how far you go up or down, right, from the origin. What we mean from that is that if it's positive, you are going up in that direction. This would be positive y. So you move 2 units up, 3 units up if it's positive 2 or positive 3. And then if it's negative 5, you are moving 5 units down, right? So that's what we are talking about here. So the coordinates actually give you direction. Remember, go back to the fly we discussed earlier. He was trying to describe the exact position of where the fly was sitting on his ceiling, right? So if you imagine that point to be a fly, it's the same concept, okay? Right, so you can plot the points on the Cartesian plane. We've discussed that a point will have 2 coordinates, right? And those coordinates do form an ordered pair. And we've also discussed that the x-coordinate tells us how far we have to move to the left or to the right along the x-axis. So if we are looking at this coordinate 3 and negative 4, or this ordered pair, the positive 3 actually tells us to move 3 units to the right. Okay? And then the negative 4, what does it tell us? It actually tells us to move 4 units down along the y-axis. Okay? And then we now need to remember something else. That the origin also has coordinates, and those coordinates are 0 and 0. Do not write undefined. Be very careful here. Okay? because you don't have to move any units away from the origin for along the axis or along the y-axis. So when you're at the origin, your x is 0 and your y is 0. Okay. All right. So you'll still have your ordered pairs in that form, a 0 and a 0. And obviously they still represent the same concept, x units to the left and x units to the right. Just in this case, you don't go anywhere. All right. Then let's look at when we actually have two values like 3 and 2. How many units are we moving along the x-axis? We have to move 3 units to the right. Okay. Now we are actually plotting this point, right? We are plotting 3 and 2. We are plotting this ordered pair. And then the y coordinate tells us we have to move 2 units up. So our fly is sitting right at that point there. Right. This is the first method. There's two methods. It all depends on which method you've been taught at school. So please don't get into a panic and also find yourself trying to alternate between the methods. You are going to use whichever one you are comfortable with. All right. I'll show you both methods in a moment. So you've seen the first one. You start off by checking the vertical distance and then calculating or doing the, you start off by the horizontal distance and then the vertical distance. I keep messing up those two. Okay, so now this is when you start off with the value of x, count the units, and then count the y units, right? But sometimes you find that you actually just locate the 2 points, like in this example. So now all I've done is change the sign of the x value here. So it's, you can use the same Cartesian plane from before, right? So here you can first identify where -3 is on your Cartesian plane. So it's there. Then the next thing is for you to identify where +2 is along your Cartesian plane for y, and then that's 1, 2. So it's there, okay? And then just like in the previous lesson, we are trying to find where exactly those 2 points meet, and we find that that's where they meet. So that tells you -3 and 2 is actually here. So what do we discover here is that the ordered pair actually tells us the position. It's telling us the position of the point, okay? So it's actually just giving you directions. It's almost like telling you to turn left and then turn right at the tuck shop type of lifestyle, okay? All right. So we are going to plot these points, and for these points, I'm not going to show you any animation. I'll just show you where the points are, right? So we start off with D, and D is given by 3 and 3. So what's the x value? Your x value is 3, and then your y value is also 3, okay? So that means you need to start here. I'm going to use the method where the 2 lines meet. Then my y value is 3, right? If I'm using that method, I will go like this, draw another dotted line, and then where there's 2 meet would be my point, right? That's the first method you can use. The second method, what would you do? You would actually have to start at the origin and then move 3 units to the right, like that, and then move 3 units up because it's +y. And we still end up at the same point, right? So you can use both of those methods, whichever one you are comfortable with, and you get that the point is a D there. Okay, so I'm going to do these last 2, and then I'll give you an activity to actually plot your own points as well, right? Now, I've shown you the first and second method for those. The next point is E. It's -2 and -3. All right, because we now know about quadrants, I want us to first identify the correct quadrant for drawing this point. Where are the x values and the y values both negative? It's in this quadrant here. And this is your third quadrant, right? So in this quadrant, it's where this point must be. Okay. Then I'll use the first method and I identify where -2 is along the x-axis, and then I identify where -3 is along the y-axis. Where these 2 points meet will be my point, right? That's the first method. The second method will be for me to move 2 units to the left, and then 3 units down, like that. What do you know? We still end up at the same spot. Okay. I actually like this method a lot, the one I just did now, where I started along the x-axis until the y-axis. You'll find that it becomes quite handy when you need to calculate your gradient and things like that. So you will see that method again when we start drawing graphs using the gradient intercept method as well. Okay, so let's plot that point. Okay, so we have discussed that point. And then for F, I'm going to just ask you to quickly plot point F on your own. I will be here on screen. So just take a quick second to plot point F. Don't forget, when you plot your points, you need to check what the X value is. Is it positive or is it negative? And then also check, is your Y value positive or negative? All right, that's how you figure out the position. And in the meantime, you can also send us your questions on 079-454-9535. All right, questions and pictures of your work. All right, so where's point F? Point F is actually found in the fourth quadrant. Do you see that? It's found in the fourth quadrant, and you could have used whichever method would work for you. Starting off with the first one, I'll go 3 units to the right and then 5 units down. The next one you would have identified where 3 is, and then also identified where -5 is. Where the 2 points meet, you would have joined. You would have drawn your point. Okay, so that's the same concept. I hope you understand how to plot points. So I'm going to give you this activity. I'm going to ask you to please plot the following points. Do use a pencil for this. That way later on we can maybe still use the same Cartesian plane to draw graphs and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to please plot A, B, C, and D on your Cartesian plane. You don't need cross lines or graph paper. Just draw a neat graph on half a page and use a proper scale or a similar one so that your points are properly spaced next to each other. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do that before we check the solutions and then start drawing actual graphs. You have 3 minutes for this part. All right, welcome back, class. How are you doing so far? I hope you are having as much fun as I am. Do send me those pictures. I'd like to see the type of artworks you've created so far. All right, on 079 454 9535. All right, so let's quickly plot these points and then get into drawing our graphs. All right, so the first point is 1 and 3. So the x is 1 and then the y is 3. Now we've interpreted this. This means that we must move 1 unit along from 0 to 1 on the x-axis, and then we must move 3 units from 0 along the y-axis, and we are moving up because it's positive, right? So that would be the first method. The second method would be this one, where you identify the position of each of these points, 1 along the x-axis and 3. Then where the two meet is where you plot your point, right? And that gives you the point A in that position, right? The next one, you have -1. So that means you would move from 0 and 1 unit to the left. +2 means you must go 2 units up. They are your second units. So they should meet at that point, right? That would be the other method for B. Or we identify where -1 is and where +2 is for Y. Then where the two meet, you plot your point B. C is going to be in your third quadrant because both x and y are negative. So you identify where -2 is along your x-axis and where -3 is along your y-axis. Where the two meet, you plot the point C. Then we also need the point D. Now D is in the fourth quadrant, right? We have a positive x value and a negative y value. So when we plot them, that's where D should be. You will get a mark for having each of the points in the correct quadrant. So it's very important to pay attention to the signs so that you plot the points in the correct quadrant. Okay. I'd like to give you just 1 minute to quickly do your corrections before we get into plotting graphs. All right, welcome back. Now we are going to start drawing some graphs. This is the part I'd like for you to actually start doing. It says complete the table below and write down the ordered pairs. And here you've been given an equation for a linear function. The equation is y is equal to 2x plus 3, right? Right. So I'm going to give you time just to answer A, and then I'll give you time to answer B, okay? Before we even get into everything else, I'd like for you to actually try completing the table, and then we'll do the drawing of a graph together. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to quickly complete the table and write down your ordered pairs. Okay, so let's look at how to complete the table. We have done this in our baseline. So what we want to do here is to do a calculation where we substitute each of the given x values into the equation, right? So I'm just going to do that first. And while I do that, if you need to correct your work, you can use that time to do so. So we are going to substitute x is equal to -3, and then we have 2 times -3, that gives you -6, plus 3, you get -3. Then we substitute -2. That means you're going to have 2 times -2 plus 3. -4 plus 3 gives you -1. When you substitute -1, you end up with -2 plus 3, right? So your answer there is +1. So those are your values so far. 2 times 0 plus 3 is equal to 3. Now, what type of intercept is that? X or Y? It's the y-intercept, right? And it should be the same as that value there, okay? Because it's the same concept, right? This is your y-intercept, and also that's also your y-intercept. Then you also have y is equal to 2 times 2 plus 3, and you get 7. 4 plus 3 gives you 7. Then once you've filled in your table, you have -3, -1. You make sure you write each of the values under the correct x value. So it must correspond with the value you had substituted into your equation. If you've done that, you get 2 marks. Yes, it was an example, but I trust that you were able to do it. The next part is for you to write down your ordered pairs. When you write down your ordered pairs, you start with the x value followed by the y value. So you have -3 and -3, -2 and -1. So we are using them in this order, right? So these are the pairs we are working with. 0 and 3, as well as 1 and 5, and 2 and 7. If you've written them correctly, you also get another mark. So well done. All right. We are going to use the same values again. So you'll see them just now in a moment. Don't get into a panic. Okay. Now the next part was for you to draw the graph. All right. Now before you draw the graph, I want to remind you of the basic steps to drawing a linear graph. All right. So here you are given an equation and you have to use a table. Remember, sometimes they don't even give you the table. You choose the values that go onto the table, right? And most of the time, when you choose your values, you make sure it's your x-intercept, your y-intercept, and one other point. You need a minimum of 3 points to plot a linear graph in general, all right? So you are going to complete your table for the corresponding y values. We've done that, right? Next thing we have to do is to choose a scale, right? And the scale must at least accommodate 3 of our points. And then you must also plot each of the pairs that you are going to use. After you've plotted them, you join the points and then we label the graph. You don't need to write this down. We are going to follow it practically in a moment, okay? So step 1, we've covered. We have completed a table, right? Then we've written down our ordered pairs. Those are the ordered pairs, right? So if you haven't corrected them, this is your chance. Now the next part is for you to choose a suitable scale. In my case, along the x-axis, my graph is increasing in ones, and also along the y-axis, the graph is increasing in ones. What is missing here is the actual labels, okay? This is very important. Always label. You don't have to label each and every corner. I'm just doing that for your benefit. But what you want to do is to label where your x-axis is and where your y-axis is. We did say that, and we've also chosen the correct scale. The next thing is to plot the points. So -3 and -3, we are just using this method where you identify the position of -3 and also -3 for y. Then where the 2 points meet, that's where you plot the point. -2 and -1, where they meet, you plot your point. So you keep doing that, all right? And then do you notice that your points are starting to give you a straight line? Because I have the y-intercept there, I keep going with plotting the points for this part. Okay. And then we said after you plotted the points, you join the points. This is the part I meant. You have to draw a line. If it's a curve, unfortunately, that would not be a linear graph. But if it was a curve, you would still have to join the points. So in this case, it's a straight line. You join the points. What's missing? You actually need to label your graph. Tell us what the name of the graph is. So y is equal to 2x plus 3. That is the equation of this graph. Do make sure you label it. This is important because at some point you might be asked to draw two graphs on the same set of axes. You will need to label those graphs, okay? All right. So this was just us getting an idea of what we would need to do in order for us to draw a graph. I'm just going to give you 1 minute to quickly copy this one down before we move on to an activity. Okay, class. So we are going to now look at another example. And this example, I actually want you to participate and do some of the work with me. All right. So the instruction is sketch the line for the equation y is equal to 2x. That would be the type of instruction you get in an exam. They won't give you the table or tell you what the steps are. I've just done this so that we know what steps to take when we draw our graph, okay? So we see the first step is for us to have a table and complete the table. Luckily, the y values, the x values have been given, so we need to calculate the y values, okay? I'm going to do the first two values with you, and then I'll ask you to complete them, do the ordered pairs, and also plot the graph. So when we find the y values, we substitute, right? So I'll start here. We have y is equal to 2x. We have to substitute -2. So that gives you 2 times -2. Oh, I guess I'm rewriting it. That gives you -4, okay? The next one is y is equal to 2 times -1. And that gives you -2. Okay? If you had to write these 2 points as these two as ordered pairs, what would you write? You'd start off with the value of x that you substituted, and then followed by the value of y that you got afterwards, right? Also here, you start off with the value of x you substituted, followed by the value of y that you got after substitution. This is how you'd write these 2 points. Okay, so you have an idea of what will be required of you. Okay, so you're going to follow this method. Try to do this work without a calculator so that you are actually following your work and checking that you are not making any errors. Okay, so I'll take you back to the slide. Okay, so you're going to complete the table, write down the ordered pairs, and then after that, we'll correct that part first before you draw the graph, okay? So I'll just give you 2 minutes to quickly complete the table. Remember, I've done the first two with you. welcome back, class. Please don't forget to send me your questions and your pictures of the work you have done on 079 454 9535. I am not getting any communication from you. I take it this lesson is making you work very, very hard, right? And that's good as well. So if you are engaging with the lesson in your books and in class, that's also perfect, right? But do save our number in case you'd like to ask a question. All right, so you were asked to complete the table. So the first two values we've done, a -4 and -2. Then when you substitute 0, 2 times 0 gives you 0. You substitute 1, you get 2 times 1, which gives you 2. You substitute 2, you have 2 times 2, which gives you 4. All right, then you write down your ordered pairs. Remember, you start with the value of x and then the value of y. If you notice here, it's not aligned, but if you notice there, what we get is the origin. So this graph actually goes through the origin. Okay. So the next part will be for you to plot this graph. Okay. Now, if you notice, your scale is not that complicated. Along the x-axis, we have between -3 and +3. And along the y-axis, we have between 4 and -4. So I'm going to plot this graph with you. We start off with the first point. So the first point is at, you would identify where -2 is and where -4 is. Where the two meet is where you plot your point. You do the same as well for -1 there and -2. What's the next one? 0 and 0. It's there. Then we plot that one. Next one is 1 unit to the right. So I'll use a different method. 1 unit to the right and then 2 units up. Ends up there. So that's where you should have your point. Next one is 2 units to the right and 4 units up. Okay, this is why you need a ruler for this. Okay, so they meet up there. Let me clear up so that we can see what's happening on our graph. So this is where you should have all your points located. They already tell you what shape they form. It is a linear graph. Remember, the highest exponent for x there is 1. So you've drawn this graph. Is it complete? No, you need to label the graph. Y is equal to 2x. That's also important, right? We followed the same steps. We completed a table, wrote down the ordered pairs, chose a suitable scale for our graph, plotted the points, joined the points, and then labeled the graph. Okay, right. So this is what you would be expected to do in general when you are plotting a graph. Should you be given the instructions sketch, it means that you just need to have a suitable scale. You can draw this without using a graph paper or anything like that, but do make sure it's neat enough and then your scale is visible and it works for all the points you have chosen. All right. Now I'm going to give you an activity. Please sketch the line for the equation y is equal to -x plus 2. Because I don't want you to make too many errors when you do this, I'm going to first give you 2 minutes to quickly complete the table and write down the ordered pairs, all right? Then once you have that, I will give you time for you to do the graph, all right, to draw the graph. And luckily with this graph, you should be able to draw it on the same axis as the previous graph as well. Okay, so you have 2 minutes to quickly complete your table and also write down your ordered pairs. Okay, class. So we are going to look at the solutions you should have for your table, and then you have enough time for you to correct your ordered pairs as well as plot your graph. Okay, so we are starting off with just the table. Now you notice already just by looking at your graph that this graph is going to be decreasing, right? Do you see that? Okay, so let's do this. Y is equal to negative times negative 2 plus a 2. So that means you actually have 2 plus 2 and you have a 4. The next value is going to be y is equal to negative times negative 1 plus a 2. That gives you 1 plus 2 and you get a 3. Right, I'm going to write the coordinates for these points already. I substituted negative 2 and I got y. I substituted negative 1 and this I have to correct. I substituted negative 1 and my output was a 3. Right. Okay. And then, so you get an idea of what you should have done there, right? So your values here should be 4, 3. When you substitute 0, there you have 0 plus 2, which gives you 2. When you substitute 1, you now have negative 1 plus 2, and that gives you positive 1. And then you substitute positive 2 there. It's negative 2 plus 2, that is a 0. Okay? These 2 points, when y is 0, this is your x-intercept. Where x is 0, this is your y-intercept. Okay? So you already have 2 points that you can use to plot this graph. You just need one other point. Okay? Now, I'm going to write down your ordered pairs, negative 2 and 4, negative 1 and 3, as well as 0 and 2, 1 and 1, and you also have 2 and 0. Okay, unfortunately we are actually out of time, so I'll ask you to just continue drawing the graph on your own a bit later, now that you have the correct points for this graph. Okay, so you should be able to plot it once you are alone. Okay, so we are now going to quickly move on. I'll just give you 1 minute to quickly correct your ordered pairs, and then I'll give you the homework. So you just have 1 minute to correct this part before we go to the homework. Okay, welcome back, class. So now I'm going to show you, I won't give you the solution for this graph because you still have to plot it. So I'm just going to quickly show you your homework. All right, and then after your homework we will go straight to your summary because I haven't received any questions or comments from you so far. Right, so this homework, please just take a picture. Just quickly snap a picture of the homework, share it with your classmates so you can practice. If you're watching this on your tablet, you can just quickly screenshot it. Okay, and then you will practice it, follow the same steps that we've done. I am talking just to give you time to take a picture. I hope you have one. All right, so let's move on to our summary. All right, so today what we learned was the whole makeup of a Cartesian plane. So the components of a Cartesian plane, we learned where the origin is. The origin is the point where the two x's meet, and remember the coordinates for the origin are 0 and 0. We know that the Cartesian plane is made up of a horizontal line known as the x-axis and then a vertical line known as the y-axis, right? And then we did discuss also how to draw a graph, right? So when you're drawing your graph, first you are going to complete a table that has corresponding x and y values. So you would either choose the x values to plug into the equation, or you'll be given the x values. Then you complete by substituting the x value into the equation to get the y value. Then you write down your ordered pairs. After that, you choose a scale, right, for your to suit the x values. If they are too big, usually you would need to have at least a minimum of 3 points that you are able to plot, and those should include your x-intercept and your y-intercept, okay? And then you plot each of your pairs. After you've plotted them, you join the points. So you plot the points and then you join them. And don't forget to label the graph. So do state that this graph is y is equal to 2x plus 2 or so forth, okay? In the next lesson, we are starting transformations. So we are going to be looking at reflections about the x-axis or the y-axis. Do make sure you are ready for that. If you have graph paper, it will also come in handy. It's not a requirement, but it will be useful. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for joining us today. This lesson is proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. Please do stay safe, and I will see you in the next lesson.